Welcome back to the Thanville Line Briefing Room, where my father joining me over his 30 plus years of experience out in the field, here to give his insight and his stories. So, kind of continuing from the last episode, I know over at Greedy you did a lot of extra activities with your teams and field operations. Were there any others that kind of stuck out to you that you did for a while?
Field training of new deputies was part of the responsibilities as well. We operated under the San Jose model, and that's out of San Jose, California. They developed basically a curriculum and a standard for training new peace officers and police officers and deputy sheriffs. And so we followed that model, which included, there was 4 phases, and each phase typically had 80 hours per phase. And sometimes each phase had a different training officer. And sometimes it would only be divided up into 2, depending on the agency size. So you might have a training officer for the first and third, and then a different one for the second and fourth. And then if there was any remedials or extending phases, that might be another training officer. So I was involved in that and brought just some experience from the previous job at Newcastle over to the sheriff's office for that. But part of that field training program is we had a daily observation report. So we had to basically, you teach it, you demonstrate it, you teach it some more, and then you observe the new recruits perform those tasks. And those tasks could be anything from writing reports, investigating crashes, taking report calls, dealing with the public, investigating burglaries, collecting evidence on sexual assaults or homicides. There's a long laundry list. And even just patrol operations like traffic enforcement and documenting how to properly pull over vehicles. It sounds pretty simple. It sounds like just turn the lights on and they'll pull over. Well, you want to take into consideration, where you're pulling those cars over. We always like to say that the violator decides where to commit the violation, but we decide where to enforce that violation. So, just because it happened right here in front of us doesn't mean I have to stop you right now. I try to wait, and I teach to wait a reasonable distance until we can hope that when we activate that equipment that they pull into a safe spot, preferably off the road. So we teach that, and then teach how to fill out those citations. Scratching out an old school one on paper, and then, press hard, 3 copies, give them one. Or now it's all digital, so it's all entered in on the computer and hit print and give them a copy. As far as driving the vehicle, I became a law enforcement driver training instructor back in 2007. Taught at the Basic Academy down in Ada at Cleat. Spent several different academies down there. It's a week-long. One instructor is typically assigned 3, maybe 4 students per car. We would demonstrate all of the individual maneuvers, and then we would get to ride in the passenger seat and verbally instruct those students for each maneuver. So it was always kind of a joke. We got to drive it 3 times and then ride 27. But I did that for a bunch of years, and then in 2008 I went to work for Oklahoma State University in Oklahoma City, doing the law enforcement driver training there. but they called it precision driver training there because we taught more than just law enforcement. There were court-appointed classes. There were fire and EMS students that would come through that program. There were grant programs. One was called Alive at 25, and to where as long as a individual had their learner's permit and they signed up for this class, they could come out and we would teach them a condensed version of all the same maneuvers and driving techniques that we would teach law enforcement, just not at the same speeds and not at the same distances. We did not teach any of the pursuit driving to the non-law enforcement, none of the emergency response to the non-law enforcement classes. So I did that for a number of years. Interesting story about that. By doing well and being a good instructor, the lead instructor at OSU OKC had retired from the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and he had developed the emergency vehicle operations course for OHP, but he brought all that knowledge to OSU OKC. Well, shortly after I don't know how long he worked at OSU, but we got to know each other really well. But shortly after he retired from OSU OKC, he went to work for an insurance company. And that insurance company was the insurance carrier for the Miami Police Department in Miami, Florida. I don't know all the details, but they were paying out a lot of insurance claims after officers were involved in collisions. And so Randy, this individual, he presented it to the right people and said, look, I can get a group of instructors together. We already have all the curriculum. We've all taught together many years. We can go down to Miami and we'll teach some driver training. We'll do some remedial driver training to your habitual offenders down there. So I had the opportunity to be one of 4 instructors to be picked to go down, not once but twice, to the city of Miami in Florida and teach for a week to the Miami Police Department. And so I thought that's a pretty good feather in the hat. Mm-hmm. Did that twice. I think I already said that, so we'll say it twice. And it's just been real rewarding to do that because, one of the things that we do the absolute most in law enforcement is drive. Regardless of how many times we get in a fight, how many times we shoot a pistol or a rifle or a shotgun, or how many times we write a report or deal with the public, we drive there every time. And so it's just one of those things. It's perishable skills too, and you build those gross motor skills. And if you don't continue and consciously build those gross motor skills, that during a stressful situation, you're always going to revert back to them. So, and just for the topic of conversation, you and your brother had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time behind the wheel of a car at OSU OKC in a controlled environment with an instructor, but during off instruction time. But I think you drove every car that we had out there, every type of car that we had out there, from Ford Taurus, Dodge Charger, Chevy Tahoe, Ford Crown Vic, the skid car, all of them. Of course, your brother did too. So, but I feel like it's made you a better driver too. So, I may have got off topic there a little bit. I don't know. I kind of exaggerated or go on, but anyway, by being an LEDT instructor, also I was able to provide that to the sheriff's office. So anytime that we had a deputy involved in a incident, whether it be a collision, single vehicle, had one deputy just hit a curb. He was doing a U-turn, hit a curb, damaged the vehicle, and due to the policy, they had to have some remedial training. So they spent a couple hours with me, and we just went over some maneuvers in the parking lot and primarily worked on, in that particular case, the proper technique for doing a U-turn. And worked on shuffle steering technique and documented all that and put it in their training file, and they were blessed to be back out on patrol.
What's, just for them to see, what's the or what was the techniques or teaching skills you told that officer for the U-turn?
Well, the safe way for us to teach doing a U-turn is you pull over to the far right-hand side of the road, angle your car just a little bit, check your mirrors, and then stick your head out the window and actually look, and then make a safe U-turn and go the other direction. The two big techniques, two big things there is pull all the way to the right-hand side, stick your head out the window and look before you go.
What are some other, I guess, some basic techniques that you taught, but also some advanced ones that maybe not everyone was taught?
Well, we'll go through a whole curriculum. We'll start out with shuffle steering. Shuffle steering is a technique where you don't cross your hands over. You know, if you were to take a steering wheel and think of it as a clock, you got 12 o'clock at the top and 6 o'clock at the bottom. Both of your hands stay on their respective side of that steering wheel. They don't cross over on either side, top or bottom. There's a few reasons for that, but the primary reason for that is just because you don't want your arm crossing in front of you. If you are in a collision, that airbag goes off, and now your arm's between you and that airbag. That's really the primary reason for that. Secondary reason for that is when you're wearing body armor and you're driving the vehicle, it actually gets a little bit cumbersome reaching across because that body armor is restricting some of that movement. A tertiary reason for that is if you're on a radio and you've got a microphone in your hand, and if you're calling a pursuit or you're talking to dispatch because you're on the way and you're trying to get the information to a hot call, and you go to cross over, then you can wrap that microphone around that steering wheel, or around that steering column, and cause you to crash. So it's another reason. So it keeps that hand over on that one side. As far as the driving, we would do shuffle steering. I said that. Then we would do a turnaround maneuver. We would do a backing maneuver, evasive steering, controlled braking, serpentine. Let's see, what else would we? Skid car, and then emergency response and pursuits. There's a few others in there that's kind of thrown in there. There's a National Law Enforcement Reference Guide. Like there's one called a lollipop, and it's where you've got 2 lanes, and then it does a little circle and comes back. But what it does, instead of being a true arc, it actually diminishes that radius at the top of it, forcing that vehicle to go into a little bit of a oversteer, and rolling that front tire over onto its sidewall, losing some of that rolling friction, and forces you to counter steer to be able to maintain that vehicle from skidding out and taking out all those cones. But some of those other techniques, we run them at different speeds, like the evasive maneuver. Different vehicles get different speeds, but it's all from the same braking distance or steering distance. So evasive maneuver is just, it's driving straight and it's going left or right around that center maneuver and exiting out, to where the controlled braking is knowing that you're going to need to brake and squeeze that brake as you steer around that center obstacle. But the students don't know that they're going left or right until they get that cue. But it's all about smooth braking. It's not jabbing that brake. Smooth braking, shuffle steer around, come to a complete stop. There's lateral displacement where we would set that up. There would be a drive down the center, which would be a box in the middle that you would have to go left or right. If you went center, you're taking out the cones. But at different speeds, it depends on how many lanes you might laterally displace the car. Some of those speeds we would do, 55, 60 mile an hour, and it's just a one lateral displacement. So basically changing one lane. So we would do some of those techniques would cross over for civilian drivers and some for fire and EMS.
So it's kind of a double question in one, but so throughout your training days and exercises, what was your as the instructor, what was your hardest exercise to teach, but also what was the hardest for the students to grasp and comprehend?
Throughout my whole career, Hardest one to teach? Maybe building searches, because building searches were so diverse and always different. Floor plans change, doorways change, windows are different, whether it's a house, a commercial structure, a school. And there are techniques for how to move down hallways or go through corridors, techniques for how you enter through what we call the fatal funnel, the threshold into a door. Whether or not you're going in and that way, or whether you're going in and that way. It's a crisscross or a button hook. But sometimes those fundamentals about what you do with your firearm, is it pointed up, is it pointed down, is it pointed forward, depends on if there's people in front of you, if there's people behind you. Do you have partners? Is it just you? Is it you and one other person? Is it a couple people? There's what's called a married couple technique. So if there's only two of you and one's going in and one posts at the door, checks the room, comes back out, next one goes. If there's several of you, it just takes time. So I don't necessarily say it was hard. It just was time consuming. But I guess in that manner, so was LEDT. It's time consuming because you have to demonstrate it and then instruct as you're demonstrating, but then as the students performing those tasks, you're constantly critiquing or giving instruction about hand placement, steering control, accelerator movement, braking, and so I don't know that building searches was really the right answer there. Maybe LEDT was the harder one. But firearms was difficult at times too, because shot placement, there's several different stages in just presenting your firearm downrange, and some of it is stance, it's grip, it's draw, it's breath control, it's sight alignment, it's sight picture, it's trigger control, it's and sometimes those things are difficult to teach. I guess I've been an instructor long enough, it's kind of hard to narrow down to just which one was harder and which one was the hardest one to grasp. Actually, some of the hardest stuff really is not some of the tangible technique things. It's more about teaching new deputies how to deal with people. And sometimes how to let things occur. And I don't mean that to say that let crime happen. And that's not what I'm saying. But sometimes you get more information by listening and listening harder and just letting their words come out. And so some of that is just patience. And then I guess also as an instructor, when we get into that final phase, like in field training, we would typically be in plain clothes, and that way the deputy gets all of the attention and authority from who they're dealing with, and not letting them stumble to the point they're going to fail, but letting them stumble a little bit, kind of like just with life. Some lessons just have to be learned, and we wouldn't let them fail. We wouldn't let them hurt anybody. We wouldn't let them commit any violations. Nothing that was going to be detrimental. Even to the point where if they started to take somebody into custody after an arrest, but they wanted to resist a little bit, or maybe even to the point of fighting. I'm in plain clothes evaluating, and there's that line that you have to just wait a little bit to see if they can maintain that control, to see if they can fight through that resistance. To not going to let them fail, not going to let them get hurt. So I guess that's kind of hard sometimes, is to just be patient and watch to the point of keeping them safe. So that part's kind of difficult sometimes.
Kind of a side note before my next kind of question about the patients. I don't want to get like too specific with it, but I was training a guy in a program, and he was now in the position he was being trained on, and he was in the group setting, and he was not paying attention to his surroundings, and he was just on his phone the whole time. And when the group was all communicating and getting together, getting ready to start, I was watching him and just watching him not pay attention, and in the end I let him fail, because if I would have stopped him, he wouldn't have learned anything. And I knew also that it was at a time where it could also be, it wasn't that big of a...
Wasn't critical?
No, it could be reset very quickly. But my question was just, after like all those years of just training and stuff, what's something that kind of sticks with you throughout it all, I guess in a physical teach, or something that's more mental, that you always kind of run back to teach kind of on first hand, and hope that sticks with them?
Man, kind of all of it, I mean, because it's all necessary, but I think I would probably lean a little bit more toward the law enforcement driver training, because it's, like I said, it's something that we do every day. It's something that you're riding in a vehicle that is potentially, a 4,000-pound weapon. And so when I can see that the training has been accepted, and they use those techniques, and they avoid collisions, and if they can make it through a whole career without being seriously injured or injuring somebody else, hopefully never killing somebody by some poor driving techniques, then that's pretty rewarding to me. So probably that more than anything else.
Well, that's going to be it for this fourth podcast. Be sure to tune in for this next one, as it will be the final one of this chapter. And we'll see you in the next one.
See you later.